Hi and welcome to History Legends. Here are the latest news about the Russo-Ukrainian war. This is the place where we cut the BS and talk about what the media doesn't tell you. As always, information changes by the hour, so if you have any new information, just comment it below. If you're new to this channel, make sure to check out my Ukraine playlist so you don't miss anything I've said in the past. And by now you know it, some of my Ukraine videos have been targeted with limited or no ads, so if you want to keep the show running, consider supporting me on Patreon, the link is in the description. What type of clown world do we live in? Like, come on, this gotta be a joke, right? Did you guys see how all the media was talking about the Azovstal evacuation? Honestly, I'm tired of it. Their euphemisms are so lame. Because we all remember the great evacuation of German forces at Stalingrad, or the evacuation of the French army in 1940 in German-held territory, or even how the British were evacuated from Singapore with the help of the Japanese. Let's take a quick look at what the media was saying. Let's have a little laugh to warm up. So here we have the BBC, Mariupol, hundreds of besieged Ukrainian soldiers evacuated. We sure do love the Guardian, evacuation of Azovstal plant in Mariupol in pictures. And they even used that silly image in background as if Ukrainian troops were getting saved. They talk about evacuation as if it was the Dunkirk evacuation, as if these Ukrainian troops were actually going back in safe territory. No, they're going to Siberia. Okay, here we have another clown world. From Reuters, Ukrainian troops evacuate from Mariupol, ceding control to Russia. Oh my god. French troops evacuate the country, cedes control to Germany. As of now, you see what I did there? We stopped talking about breakups. You should now say you cede control over your girlfriend to another guy. And I think this guy in the picture in the bunk bed prison bus, I think he's quite famous. I'll try to put a before after just for you to see. But above all, the most pathetic was CNN. Are we surprised? Are we surprised? They had the nerves to say that the armed forces of Ukraine launched an operation to rescue defenders of Mariupol blocked on the territory of the Azovstal plant. Okay guys, can we all agree that the level of copium is like sky high? Oh yeah, I almost forgot. The trophy, the award of the Lord of the Copium goes to Louise Mensch. In a tweet, she said, they did not surrender, they're being evacuated. Thus, they're not prisoners of war. Oh my god. Honestly, I don't even know what to think. She's definitely not in the same planet as all of us. The timeline of the surrender. Let's try to reconstruct events the best we can. And by the way, you know when Wikipedia announces the end of a battle, it's 100% legit. Especially when it's a victory of the baddies. So in the morning of the 19th of May, 1,730 Ukrainian soldiers had surrendered. And this increased to 2,800 by the end of the day. And according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, that included 717 Azov militants. Latest updates, 414 Ukrainian soldiers surrendered in Azovstal so far today, which brings the total to 2,323 prisoners. There are also reports that some soldiers refused to surrender. However, it's expected the internal pressure of the rest of the troops and command will force them to leave Azovstal too in the next hours. A few hundred are still in Azovstal. So maybe by the time we watch this video, there's gonna be new information. It all started when a group of 10 Ukrainians went out of the rubble with a white flag and marched towards Russian lines. And they crossed one of the important bridges of the factory towards Russian lines. And for the first time since the beginning of the siege, Ukrainians went to talk to the Russians. It quickly became clear that it was talks about a surrender. Because shortly after, a group of about 10 Russians went into Azovstal to evaluate the situation. At first, only wounded men, and particularly those that required immediate treatment, were supposed to be evacuated. This is how the first prisoners, numbering about 20, and all were severely wounded, essentially got evacuated by Russian medical personnel using stretcher bearers. And then there was a lot of news circulating about a possible exchange of prisoners and everything, but soon after, 31 others also joined them, and they were fine, they were not wounded. What seemed to have happened is that that group that got in touch with the Russians was actually an isolated unit from the main grouping at Azovstal. The factory is huge and you have a lot of different pockets of resistance. They had no more ammunition, no more supplies, and above all, no more water. They were relentlessly getting bombarded by the Russians day and night. Imagine what it does to the morale. And on top of that, the Russians were starting to break into the factory itself, taking one building after the other. Overall, for them, they've had enough. And again, what seemed to have happened is that this created some sort of cascading effect on a lot of other groups at Azovstal that followed them. Many people claim that this was out of control from the Ukrainian government and the commanders at Azovstal. And according to them, this is when the commanders at Azovstal stepped in. They didn't want to make it seem as if the soldiers took the initiative on their own and called for an end of the fighting for all forces in the Azovstal factory. Because it became clear to them that nobody could stop this. If it was an organized surrender, they would all have left the factory together at once. But here, Ukrainian soldiers were coming out in batches of 7 to 80 people, with long intervals between each groups and no apparent structure. And soon after, Russian sappers showed up to remove the mines and open a path. Everyone claims that there was tension in the air. Everyone was vigilant to avoid any sort of provocation. And allegedly, when the first groups emerged from the factory, some Ukrainian soldiers stopped along the way and kind of fiddled with some green boxes. They were actually disarming some homemade mines that they had hidden along the path. Now, when the government saw this, it was in damage control mode, trying to convince everyone that they were kind of involved in this and that this was planned. They even went as far as to say that the office of the president asked the defenders of Azovstal to hold until the Eurovision, the freaking Eurovision, to raise this topic in front of the Western world, and only after they would allow the surrender to start. What is this theory? Honestly, I don't know which one is worst, whether it's true or not. And then we have a domino effect again with the government. On May 16th, the Ukraine General Staff announced that the garrison of Mariupol had fulfilled its combat mission to allow to explain why this was happening, to have a safe exit. Let's be honest, most Russian combat units have left Mariupol for a long time now. A lot of them are already fighting in Donbass, namely in Popasna. Only a string of troops was left around Azovstal. And here apparently in this video, Zelensky was saying how the evacuation mission from Azovstal continues as it is led by our military and intelligence officers. That is a lie. That is false. It was an unconditional surrender. And according to Dmitry Polyansky, the Russian deputy at the UN, the Azov militants surrendered with no conditions. And there was no agreement about an exchange of prisoners either. Some claim that for President Zelensky, the Azovstal surrender happened at the wrong time. Because bravery is contagious, but so is collapse. All this has a bad effect on the morale of Ukrainian forces in Donbass, especially for those fighting in the cauldron at Severodonetsk. It is even believed that he wanted the defenders at Azovstal to die heroically in battle and to create a myth out of them, to transform them into martyrs. Martyrs. The same way as remember the Alamo. Thing is, in my opinion, the longer the siege lasts, the less likely soldiers will be willing to die in battle. For example, the Spartans at Thermopylae lasted 3 days, the French Foreign Legion at Cameron 24 hours, and the defenders of the Alamo 13 days. Basically, to show an example of courage for all other Ukrainian forces fighting. So this idea that this was a planned surrender, I don't buy it. If it was, now is not the right time. And on Twitter, the advisor of the president, Mikhailo Podolyak, said, 83 days of Mariupol defense will go down in history as the Thermopylae of the 21st century. I don't know if he's ever opened a history book, because little did he know, all the Spartans died at the Battle of Thermopylae. But what a lot of people think is that the heroic nature of the defenders at Mariupol was built on the fact that these men would never surrender. And it came really as a shock that they just surrendered like that. And who can blame them? I'm in no position to criticize them, I'm just observing what's happening. One of the first batches of prisoners was recorded by Russian television. It became clear that not only the wounded would be taken out of Azovstal, In front of the cameras, there were 300 men, among which 50 were wounded, that were transported by 12 Russian buses. The wounded were brought to the hospital of Novoazovsk and the others to Elenovka. And 2 Ukrainians that surrendered became sort of infamous. The one on the left side of the picture was wearing the arm pad of the SS Division Galicia, and the other on the right had the emblem of the 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf. Small detail for some. Just imagine the scandal if some German soldiers had the same exact arm pads. And in this video, you can see how Ukrainian troops are laying down their arms. Allegedly, the very famous Captain Palamar, also known as Kalina, one of the deputy commanders of the Azov battalion, surrendered on May 18th at approximately 9 p.m. A report says that another of the big 3 Azov leaders, Volin, left Azovstal and went out to surrender. And there's also no news of Denis Prokopenko, another important figure of the Azov battalion. We'll know within the next few days. Allegedly, the commanders agreed to surrender, but at the condition of not being filmed. And this is perhaps why we don't have pictures of Kalina surrendering. Let's talk about numbers. 2,500 people were at Azovstal at the time of the surrender. 404 were wounded, 55 in critical condition. There were also 3 Russian prisoners, 1 officer and 2 soldiers, 200 dead bodies that were in a frozen state, and I think 3 women that were pregnant. And out of the 2,500, 804 were part of the Azov battalion. And this makes me question how many guys from the Azov battalion actually fought at Mariupol since day 1. According to Wikipedia, it's 800 to 1,000 fighters. But you can't tell me they suffered either 0 casualties or only 200 in nearly 3 months of fighting. So there's something fishy there. According to Russian estimates, by mid-March, when the encirclement was completed, there were 8,500 defenders left. At the same time, Ukrainians said there were only 3,500 defenders, which again seems a bit odd, considering the fact that there's 2,500 men at Azovstal. Russians claim that they have captured 4,000 soldiers at Mariupol since the beginning of the siege, including 1,600 of the 36th Marine Brigade that surrendered at Azovmash. 4,000 prisoners! That's much more than the 3,500 defenders claimed by Ukraine. I don't know who to believe at this point. The numbers are all over the place. Thing is, at this point, there are about 7,000 Ukrainian soldiers in Russian custody. I think the real problem of the surrender of Mariupol is that the Ukrainian forces that will get encircled in the future will know that nobody will come to rescue them. That if they're encircled, they're abandoned. GG, well played. If you don't give your men hope, how do you expect them to fight? Not only that, the troops that were abandoned at Mariupol were considered elite. So imagine what guys in territorial battalions must be thinking right now. It kind of makes me think of the French surrender at Dien Bien Phu. It lasted 2 months, and a lot of the troops that surrendered were considered elite, among them the paratroopers. And when the entire military and the entire country saw that even those guys surrendered, the top level guys, that there was no point to continue the war in Indochina. It was a psychological defeat. And this is what we mean when collapse is contagious. And this is why I think that not allowing Ukraine forces to withdraw from Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, and all these areas is an unmitigated disaster. It will simply be Mariupol 2.0. And we know how it's gonna end. How can we sacrifice 17,000 men just like that? For what purpose? But the biggest mistake would be to let that happen again at Severodonetsk. At Mariupol, you can say, okay, it went so fast, but there's no excuse now. And here's a little advice for Ukraine. Since we're talking about the Alamo, remember that 2 Texan armies had been defeated through encirclements. There's no shame in retreating. Sam Houston retreated with the remainder of the Texan army to the immense displeasure of his troops. But at least he kept his forces mobile and intact. And that way he won the decisive battle of San Jacinto. Anyway, let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you like the information I provide, make sure to check out my Patreon. The link is in the description.